So about 2 months ago, there was the first attack, the very famous one, the fight, fight, fight response from Trump afterwards. That was, I believe his full name was Thomas Matthew Crooks, and he is a ghost. He's like basically had no internet profiles to speak of. Some accounts came out after the fact. But for a man in his early 20s to have such limited internet exposure is odd. And then on top of that, we still have no motive, and no one seems to care that we have no motive. We also have the rooftop from which he took those shots. I believe he got off 8 rounds, maybe 7. That rooftop was initially reported by the United States Secret Service that, in fact, they were using supplemental security detail. This story goes really deep, so cut me off at any point.
No, please.
They were using supplemental security detail because they don't have enough Secret Service agents for the detail on Trump, because he is not the president of the United States. He's not the first lady. What happened was the very day, there's so much weirdness with this day. It's absolutely bizarre. But the very day of Butler, Pennsylvania, they actually pulled the regular detail that would be on Donald Trump to put it on Jill Biden, Joe Biden's wife, because she was doing some event not far away. So because of that, they supplemented with DHS, like Department of Homeland Security, which is under the purview of Alejandro Mayorkas, and local PD. So the perimeter, you would think, for any high-profile target like a former likely future president would be as far as a sniper could probably get him, right? Because you're trying to keep him alive, especially when you're doing an outdoor event, which this was. And it turns out that right after the attack happened, they said that they had relied on local PD to secure that rooftop. In the past week, it has now come out that, in fact, the local PD was told, we got it. Secret Service said that they had it. So Miss Cheadle lied, and I think she may have perjured herself, in fact. Well, this is all preliminary investigation, so we don't know for sure, but
Miss Cheadle's one of the Secret Service agents?
She was the head of the Secret Service. She resigned shortly after that failed assassination attempt. So I'm very skeptical as to how literally the best vantage point for a shot on a former and likely future president of the United States, how that rooftop stays unguarded entirely, and you have both sides pointing fingers at the other. To me, that screams inside job.
Wow.
Then we get into Florida, if you'd like.
Yeah, please. So that's the second. So when did that happen? And then when did the second one take place?
That one was, I believe it was July 13th, so 2 months ago.
Yeah.
The Ryan Ruth attack, or attempted attack, it actually didn't end up being an attack, was a little over a week ago. And it's already memory hold as if it never happened. I believe it was not this past Sunday, but the one prior. And this guy is the craziest character imaginable. I've been researching him extensively over the past week as part of doing Liberty Lockdown, as well as the show with Luke. And I can't tell you how spookified this dude is. I mean, so he's written books. He's been arrested over 100 times. He was charged with WMD charges for having a fully automatic rifle in 2002. Why that's a WMD, I have no idea.
Weapons of mass destruction charge?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know an assault rifle was that.
Super, super strange. But on top of that, like he was holed up and basically sieged by police at one point in his life. As I said, over 100 arrests, never served any significant jail time. He also then traveled to Poland to then walk across the border into war-torn Ukraine to recruit. He was seen in an Azov battalion ad. He also his internet profile is in, I think it's either Farsi or Arabic, where he's recruiting former Afghan soldiers to go and fight in Ukraine in the Foreign Legion. I mean, this guy is behaving, and in those posts, he's saying, I can get you a passport, I think through Pakistan. I mean, this is like CIA all day. That's how it reads. He also comes across as a total lunatic. So maybe he's not CIA. Maybe he's just a crazy person that is going to Ukraine in the middle of a war. That's a distinct possibility. But anyways, fifth or sixth hole at this golf course. Trump goes there basically unannounced. And so I don't know how the hell this guy knew that he was going to be there. And he is sitting in the bushes for a dozen hours.
Wow.
He's basically, camped out, creating like what amounts to a sniper's nest for 12 hours. Secret Service does not catch him. And then like right before Trump is going to get to that hole, allegedly one of the Secret Service agents sees the barrel of his gun sticking out of the bushes and they shoot at him. And he runs off, gets in his car, and only because an eyewitness caught his plates did they ever catch him. So totally bizarre.
Wow. So the guy never got a shot off at Trump. He was just
correct
aiming. Secret Service shoots at him, then he runs off.
That's the reports. I mean, this is coming from the Secret Service, so I'm very skeptical of anything at this point, but that's what they're saying.
And did they catch the guy and like he's now behind bars?
Yeah.
Mugshot? Okay, the whole thing.
Yeah, he's arrested. He is, I would hope, being interrogated very heavily to see what his deal is. But, my deep concern is that they'll Epstein the guy, that they don't want him to talk, especially if he is connected in any way. But that's assuming that he is, involved with the federal government on some level. I can't prove that. I don't know.
Sure.
But his history seems to me that if you're arrested 100 times, WMD charges, all this crazy stuff, and you never serve serious jail time, there's a distinct possibility that you're an informant or an asset to some federal agency. The fact that he was able to travel abroad, given his all these, felony charges and things that have been brought against him, seems as if maybe he was flipped in prison or they saw in him a true believer. I mean, this guy was absolutely obsessed with the like liberal world order. He comes across like a CNN, MSNBC addict where he's just totally convinced that if Ukraine loses this war, then democracy will fall, that type of rhetoric. So it's very hard to tell if he's just a lunatic or if he's a lunatic that they flipped to become an asset or if he's just putting on an act and he is in fact an asset. I don't know at this point, but very strange.
Wow. You mentioned the term memory hold.
Yes.
And this is something I've heard more recently. I wonder, just in the back of my mind, I don't know if you've ever seen the documentary Hypernormalization. And you got to watch it sometime. It's like what you were just saying, how it's hard to tell if the guy is an asset or a lunatic or somewhere in between. Or the documentary is about some of the psychological operations that Soviet Russia ran, largely under Putin, I believe.
What's it called again?
Hypernormalization.
All right, I'm going to watch that.
And one of the...
I think we're living through it.
Well, what was interesting about how effective it was is that he eventually hired this like professor of theater or something like that. And his strategy was to just create so many things at once. They would commission the protest and they would commission the counter protest and they would commission the counter protest. And they were plugging in all these false people and it just basically creates so much confusion that people just go numb, right?
Yeah.
They just go numb. And then it enabled memory holding because there's so much shit hitting the news every day, right? Bad, horrible, confusing. And that it was easy to shuffle some of those things sweep them under the rug, so to speak.
I think that's exactly what we're dealing with.
And it seems like that strategy was so effective in Russia that other people are just copying it, something like that. Again, I'm not a professional in this area, so check out the documentary. I'm sure you'd know a lot more about it than me.
Yeah.
But my question is, what memory holding, at least I think it's kind of a new term that I've heard it more recently, at least. What does that say about the events that are getting memory hold? Are these things that then contradict whatever the established narrative is? And then if they come into the limelight of the news, the proverbial powers that be are trying to sweep this thing under the rug. Shouldn't that be a signal to us that we should pay more attention to the things that are, like even with the Trump assassination attempt, the first one, I remember they weren't even calling it an assassination attempt, right? On some of the mainstream media outlets. They were calling it...
He fell during loud noises.
He fell during loud noises. And I guess that would be a preliminary effort to memory hole, right?
Yes.
You're just trying to call this thing something else to make it not worth the attention. What are your thoughts around memory holding? What signal does that send to us? How should we be thinking about things that people try to memory hole?
Yeah, I mean, to tie into that documentary you referenced and what the USSR was doing, in terms of it was basically psychological operations against their people.
Yeah.
in 2011, there was the Smith Modernization Act, which made it legal for the federal government to propagandize the American people. Prior to that, it had been illegal. And I think ever since then, we have been heavily propagandized by the federal government. So I think that memory holing is essentially a description for what we're dealing with, is that there is a very heavy, contrived narrative that we are supposed to all essentially abide by. And if you notice a major story that seems to just come up and disappear as if it was hardly a blip, particularly such a unbelievable visceral moment, like having a former president have a bullet graze his head, him bleeding, the fist pumping. I mean, the way I try and make people think about this and kind of get them like shake their mind up is like, imagine for a second if that happened to Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Barack Obama, literally any other prominent politician. It would be wall-to-wall coverage. We would have Patriot Act 2.0. They'd probably be seizing assault rifles. And there would be congressional hearings. There was congressional hearings on the Trump attack, but like it was kind of a blip. It went away very quickly. I'm talking, after J6, we had years of hearings and wall-to-wall media coverage, and we were describing, all Trump supporters as these, radical domestic terrorists and all this madness. Nothing happens after 1 inch difference, and you have one of the most gruesome attacks we could have possibly imagined. So, my opinion is that anytime you see a major story like that does not get the coverage it deserves, it's because it is counter to the narrative that they are pushing.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, click here to find more just like it, and here to find our most recent episode. Also, make sure to like this video to help shine light on the corruption of money, and be sure to subscribe to this channel to stay connected.